Folie à deux.
Welcome to Folie Deux podcast with me, Freyia. I'm a creative embodiment practitioner. This means I work one-to-one with people from a peer support perspective to aid in the retethering of the body-mind using creativity, somatics, science and psychology. Folie Deux is an outdated psychiatric term meaning shared psychosis, or literally translated from French, madness between two. This grassroots podcast aims to explore the unusual and intimate experience of being human with a special guest, either expert by education, experience, and sometimes both. Through the act of sharing, via conversation between two, Folie Deux podcast aims to question the collective understanding of so-called madness. This podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please expect some strong language and frank discussion. Content warnings can be found in the show notes. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, lovely people. Welcome back. Thanks again for choosing to return and meet me here in this strange audio space that transcends space-time to let me funnel more madness into your auditory nerve. So following on from last week's episode, I have another Jungian personality psychology themed audio offering for you today, the last in this mini-series. Sarah is back from episode 2, and along with another fellow typology nerd and content creator, Dan, is here to explore all things introverted intuition. If you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, please go back and listen to episode 2 before coming back. Everything will make so much more sense. For those of you who are in the know and are sticking around, Sarah, Dan and I all have cognitive function preferences under Jung's 8 cognitive functions theory to lead with introverted intuition. That's also known as being an NI dominant or an NI dom. This means that we naturally use this cognitive function as a go-to. It's where our thinking is most comfortable. It's a cognitive function that's the most developed for us. It's almost like a filter through which we see the world. So this episode is all based on our personal experiences as well as more in-depth information about this particular cognitive function as described by Carl Jung and other personality psychologists that follow this theory and have developed it since. We also all identify as INFJs, meaning using the Jungian model of personality theory, that our cognitive stack, again, see second episode if you don't know what this means, leads with NI, introverted intuition, followed by FE, that is extroverted feeling, then TI, introverted thinking, with extroverted sensing in our 4th function slot. Let me know if you're finding this specific content interesting by leaving me a voice note on Spotify. I'd also love to hear from fellow INFJs in the audience if you've had similar experiences to Dan and I. So please do let me know about that. You can also leave us comments on Spotify in the Q&A section. If you like this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you could rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or your platform of choice. I'm going to pass the mic now back in time to pass Sarah and pass Dan and pass me. Let's get intuitive. We have a folie à trois today. It almost sounds a bit risque, doesn't it? Like a menage à trois.
Dan's a lucky man. He's got 2 lovely ladies.
Yeah, well. What happens when 3 NFJs get together?
Awkward silences.
That's so funny. Do you want to introduce yourself, guys? Should we start with Sarah?
All right. I'm Sarah. I am an INFJ. In the last episode, I described myself as a cherubim having 4 faces. I used to be very much into volleyball and poker and a whole lot of sports, and I loved whiskey. Life has really changed in the last 3 years for me. It's been very, very focused on all of this philosophical stuff. I went through a massive existential crisis, essentially. And it was absolutely life-changing to the point that I don't really live my life anything like I used to. So all the things I used to love, I'm just like, it just doesn't really do it for me anymore. I still like the occasional glass of whiskey, but it's so rare now.
It's really interesting when I had what psychiatrists would describe as psychosis. What I would describe as I'm exploring how I relate to that. What I think you described, Sarah, when we had a private conversation as an apocalypse. Yeah, I've changed a lot since I had mine as well.
Yes. Well, the original word apocalypse is Greek and means reveal or uncover. Hence the book of Revelation. It is the apocalypse book. The definition of apocalypse has changed over time to mean the end of the world. But really it means revealing the truth. So a lot of people, when they have an existential crisis and they go through these things and they have these experiences that awaken something true inside of them, they have their own personal apocalypse.
Out of all the ways that I've been exploring, understanding what happened to me, I think that's probably the most accurate definition of all of them that I found. So thanks for gifting me that.
You're welcome.
It interestingly still seems to also have the end of the world meaning too, because it's the end of your previous world and the introduction of your new world.
Yes.
Definitely. And what about you, Dan? How would you describe yourself?
Well, I was trying to think of what my 4 faces would be. If I had to simplify them to some kind of archetype, I would say the venue owner, the artist, the activist, and the indulgent gamer.
Nice.
I mean, I've gone through phases where I created meetups and sat on panels, but now I do that digitally, still have that bug. But I'm not a regularly social person.
It sounds like you are in the meta world, though.
Yes.
That's still socializing.
Yes, but I'm very selectively social.
I'm also very selectively social. Resonate with that one.
But yeah, and then I'm an artist. I've been an artist for my entire life. I started in cartooning and branched into all kinds of different avenues of art, music, interactive. Activist, I mean, I've participated in a number of protests and stay very politically aware, and I'm an indulgent gamer since the 80s. I'm also an enjoyer of poker, Sarah. Most of my career I've been focused on user experience, and then also I'm a game designer. In 2014 was when I first got a role with Discovery, aka like Discovery Channel. This was Discovery Education. Designed learning games for them, and then worked on a VR game for 3 years, and then I've worked on a number of indie games along the way, and I'm working on a couple of games right now.
Amazing. So I always ask my guests this before we jump into our topic, where we're finding you both physically, emotionally, spiritually, if you identify with that, existentially, any of the other ways that we can exist in the world in this moment in space-time. Sarah, where are we finding you?
Physically, well, I am in Hawaii and it's beautiful outside, although it's been raining all week. My body feels good. Emotionally, at the moment, we're at a calmness. So we're not at a high or a low. We're just kind of steady, which is odd. Because I usually swing. Spiritually is complicated. I don't even know how to put it into words. Some days it's great. Some days not so good. Right now, it's uncertain. Existentially, oh boy. I might put a downer on your podcast.
You put as much of a downer on this podcast as you want. All coming as well.
Okay. Well, I see our economic system coming to an all-time end. So doom and gloom. There will be rebirth out of it. It's going to be a good thing. Just going to suck in the meantime.
Definitely capitalism is burning, in my opinion.
Yes. Yes, it is.
But yeah, I also agree that's not necessarily a bad thing. What about you, Dan? Where are you finding you physically, emotionally, spiritually, existentially?
I feel like I don't take inventory like that as often as I really should, probably. Although I am regularly working on it just as a gradual daily thing. Physically, my job has had me in a rough spot. I've been in the state of burnout for about 6 months.
Sorry to hear that, sweetheart.
That's all right. That's consequence of trying to do hard things, you know?
It's a serious thing, though, burnout.
Yeah, it is. I'm way more conscious of trying to pull myself back from it.
Good. You matter. You're not a robot, you're a human.
Yeah, thank you. I would say I'm mentally pretty good state. I wouldn't say I'm at the mentally healthiest I've ever been, but I am at certainly nowhere near the worst I've ever been. I often have trouble explaining how I am doing in the moment. It's an amalgam of many other things and many other moments, and I'm an observer. I'm observing. As long as I'm observing and I'm learning new things, then I feel good. I'm feeling happy. So,
Great. Yeah, I can relate to that. Sometimes I can be experiencing physical discomfort, also on another level feel okay with that, you know? We have meta emotions as well as emotions, you know?
Have you heard of alexithymia? Or
Yes, alexithymia, yeah.
Well, I am not diagnosed with that, but I certainly looked at it and relate with some of that.
It's actually something that I work with in my professional practice. I work a lot with embodiment, and
there may be a place for you when AI gets advanced enough to need bodies.
Oh, gosh.
My brain is now NEing in very many directions. So many things to talk about.
I know.
But this time, we're going to be talking about NI, or introverted intuition. To break that down a little bit, I have some questions to throw at you guys, as you are both much more learned in the 8 cognitive functions theory by Mr. Carl Forever Young. So I'm going to throw some questions at you so we can explore the topic on a surface level and then dive deep, as NI likes to do, into NI. So meta.
Let's do it.
Sarah, do you want to tell me what your understanding is of the concept of intuition?
Kind of an inner knowing that comes from external information.
Is there anything you want to add to that, Dan?
I like that. I'm trying to pull up this quote that I remember reading on intuition that I thought would be valuable. This is from David Lynch. Intuition is the key to everything in painting, filmmaking, business, everything. I think you could have an intellectual ability, but if you can sharpen your intuition, which they say is emotion and intellect joining together, then a knowingness occurs. And I think that's probably as good of a definition as I've ever heard.
Amazing. Yeah, I think that's a very good definition as well. I also have a quote about intuition I'd like to share. Also from another famous David, at the time, David Bowie. He said, I don't see any boundaries between any of the art forms. I think they all interrelate completely. Talking about art is like dancing about architecture. I thought that was quite a good way of describing how intuition is kind of a melding pot, comparing and contrasting various different things to create the soup and then riffing with that, if that makes any sense.
I actually found a definition from one of Jung's books that I used in one of my videos, where he describes intuition as content that presents itself whole and complete without our being able to explain or discover how this content came into existence. Intuition is a kind of instinctive apprehension no matter what the contents. Intuitive knowledge possesses an intrinsic certainty and conviction. A sort of knowing, basically.
I like the description of it coming out of nowhere, because it often feels that way.
Mm-hmm.
Although I feel that the more you become conscious of the way that your brain works, the less it feels like a lightning moment, because you can watch your thoughts form.
Yes, I would say that would be you becoming aware of your unconscious and making it conscious.
Yeah, for sure. I see what you mean. What about introversion? So for me, my previous understanding of the word introversion before I started becoming interested and aware of the 8 cognitive functions model was really actually very inaccurate. And I would never have really described myself as an introvert necessarily. As you get into it, the 8 cognitive functions model shows that everyone is ambiverted and has introverted and extroverted cognitive functions. I was always under the impression that introversion just meant being antisocial. But since learning about at least Jung's definition of introversion in terms of the internal world versus the external world, I was like, oh my God, yes, I am such an introvert. I have this crazy rich world inside my brain, and I can spend hours inside my own head. And it was just like, wow, I'm an introvert. And a realization, I guess, or a Tetris moment, I like to call them. I don't know if you guys want to speak on that, the true meaning of introversion and what that actually is.
Well, you're pretty spot on. The general use of introversion is what you were saying, a homebody versus someone who's always outgoing. That is what the general public will know and think when you say introvert or introversion. But as you were saying, cognitive introversion is, as you said, concerned with your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own inner workings. And it has more of a convergent or deductive process. Purpose is to narrow it down to one general thing. Whereas extroversion, it's expanding, it's pulling from outside of you, it's extrapolating, it's outward moving versus an inward moving.
I don't know how much you know about this from astrological archetypes, but I feel like it's quite akin to Saturnian rather than Jupiterian. Saturn is supposed to govern or represent a narrowing, whereas Jupiter is supposed to be all about expansion and more.
Okay, yeah.
I guess the way that I observe it is we are all simultaneously turning inward and outward to function as humans. Even the smallest organisms have a sense of self-embodiment to varying degrees of complexity, and then they have some understanding of the external world. So it's something that all conscious organisms have to develop to survive.
Like part of being sentient.
Exactly.
And putting those two concepts together, so intuition and introversion, how would you guys define introverted intuition? Do you want to start, Dan, because you had a quote from Jung, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact quotes, but I can mention one metaphor that he used to describe introverted intuition. He referred to it as triangulation points on a map. He said it's not the map, it's the triangulation points. When you triangulate something, you are taking known information and looking at some implied third point to come to some kind of conclusion about something. So I have two different pieces of data, and then I extrapolate more data that I have, the more I'm able to look into the void between those points, and depending on how much data I have, that can determine how strong my intuition may be about that particular thing. I'm hesitant to just simplify it to comparing.
Convergence?
Convergence is a good way of putting it. Yes, you are on a boat and you are traveling the ocean, and you are very, very convinced that there is an island there. You know that there's an island there. You've never been there, no one's seen it, but all signs point to it, so you go to it.
The way that I personally would describe my introverted intuition, and I don't know if this is correct in terms of typology, but when I was maybe about 16, 17, I started to notice that the way that I work artistically, but also in so many avenues of my life, I see the end goal, then I work out how to get there. Yes. So I see the end point first, and I often struggle with going A, B, C, D, E, F, destination.
Yes. Yes.
What I do is I have destination, and then I go, okay, how do I get there? And it's like I'll go Z, W, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
A, B, C, D, E, F, I, L, M, N, O, P.
Yep.
And then I go, okay, now I'll go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, destination, you know?
Yep. This is where specifically NITI types really, really struggle because we are not too fond of the step-by-step process that TE is so good at. I often feel like the village idiot trying to explain my ideas to certain people, especially ones who have a more business mindset, because I'm so very convinced of the outcome that I have foreseen.
Yeah, for sure.
They want me to prove it out by giving me the steps, and I can't, but I can be quite sure that I'm right. And so then I'm spun off on this whole quest of doing research, gathering data, trying to prove this thing that I know it's true.
Yes.
And then everyone thinks you're off on some rabbit trail.
But it is very satisfying when you can finally prove what you knew all along and they get it.
Yes.
I describe it as being able to do math in our head without having to show the logical proof. And they want us to show the logical proof.
The quote I've heard something like, people are too hung up on whether something works in theory to look at whether it works in practice. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think INFJs can come up with the thing that will work in practice, but then if you want them to explain the whole theory behind it, they might maybe grapple with it, because there might be so much behind the theory that they have to unpack themselves to even understand their own idea.
I often find that I've done so much thinking, I guess you'd describe it as NITIing, in my head, in my own language, using my own self-referential points, that I do know something will work. And oftentimes I will essay it as well. So like experiment with it, then go back into my head, run an algorithm, and then experiment, run an algorithm, experiment, and then be like, okay, now I can A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I will know the steps that I'm going to take once I've run that process through my brain, but I won't necessarily be able to explain it in a way that someone who is very TE, SI would understand.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Even though I do have in my head, it's just very, very me language. So using my own reference points.
Yep.
You know, like in a language that only I speak. It would take me a really long time to translate it into... I could do it, but it would just take so much energy.
I think that you're really onto something interesting there, which I have experienced as well. I can relate to a lot of different people on emotional grounds, but when it comes to specifically TESI type of rationale, I have a harder time of getting myself into that thought process, because for those people, the thought process is slamming a big book of procedures on your desk saying, read all of these and understand them, and this is how everything works. As a TI user, I'm not trying to bring all of those protocols into my head. I'm busy experimenting myself on my own things, you know?
Mm-hmm. You're trying to understand why it works, not just follow someone who tells you this is how you do it.
Exactly. It's great to have leadership quotes, and it's great to have other people's research, and you do need that, but we're not attuned to looking there first, you know?
Not at all. In fact, we usually end up finding the flaws in their hows, to's, and protocols that say, this is why you have a giant bottleneck and shit ain't getting done.
Or I have to use those protocols as means to my ends.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't know what you think of this quote. It's another David Bowie one. I thought it was quite a good example of NI in action. The quote is, there are half a dozen subjects that I return to time and time again, and that doesn't bother me because most of my favourite writers do that, to hunt down the same topic or theme from different directions each time. I don't have stylistic loyalty, that's why people perceive me changing all the time, but there is real continuity in my subject matter.
It reminds me of Georgia O'Keeffe painting the door over and over again.
Oh yeah! That's funny. I was rewatching, you guys seen Breaking Bad?
That's what I remembered that from. Jesse and Jane talking about Georgia O'Keeffe.
I just saw that episode the other day. I've been playing around when I rewatch shows now, being like, oh, I wonder if I can type the characters. Don't you think that Jesse is such an ESFP?
Yeah, I thought about that.
And I think Walter is an INTJ.
Probably, yeah.
It's been too long for me since I've seen this show. I'm going to go with yes. You're spot on.
I can't remember which one of you it was, but one of you said that you wanted to talk about how introverted sensing and introverted intuition interplay. I feel like it was you, Sarah?
Yes. So one way to explain introverted intuition is statistical learning and perception, which essentially is where you take the commonalities or the general concept of what's occurring across similar events so you can create predictions of the future. And that historical data that you're retaining, the general overview of what's happening, to be able to form predictions prevents the encoding of episodic memory, which would be stored in your introverted sensing. So the two functions literally conflict as one's trying to store the general concept and the other's trying to store the details and the specifics and the actual events that occurred.
Can I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Would that maybe explain aspects of brain fog and word finding, maybe date finding, that kind of thing? So the way that I've described this to people before sometimes is that I know the general Monet painting version of what I'm saying, but oftentimes I find it very difficult to recall the specific details, especially if it's a name, if it's a date.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And oftentimes it feels like, I don't know how tall either of you guys are because we've never met in person, unfortunately, but I'm not the tallest person. I'm just an average lady height. So I'm about 5'5". So I often have, the experience of not being able to reach a top shelf, for example. And it feels very much like cognitively, that's what goes on with me, where it's like something on the tip of my tongue. I can kind of see it, taste it, feel it, but I can't get the specifics and it won't come out of my mouth.
I call that needing an olive branch. I need something to hit the right branch in my brain to trigger the actual details. Otherwise, I just have a general understanding and know what it is, but I can't give you the nitty-gritty.
For you, Sarah, is it often for me, I'm very sense memory person or a feelings memory person?
Yes.
Which I would argue are actually the same things. That's a whole other kettle of fish. But for me, like, I don't know, a smell or a story that usually has some kind of like an emotional memory or a sense memory that might be a photograph or a piece of fabric, a song can help me recall.
Triggers a memory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It just comes to me now like a little Tetris moment, like all the little Tetris blocks fitting into place and going ding, little NI revelation in real time. How meta. But I guess that would make sense because we have FE and SE in our full cognitive function stack, don't we? So
yeah, most of our memory, unless we are truly present in the moment instead of using our NI. So we have to be using our SCSI access to really ingrain the memory of the details that we can recall easily and actively. Otherwise, when we're in our NI and we're not truly present in the moment because we're up above on a big picture scale, already kind of predicting what's going to happen next rather than truly experiencing the moment, that activity prevents us from storing the memory for us to actively recall the details without needing an outside trigger like a photo or a smell or a song or something that triggers the memories for you to recall that sensory impression that's left inside of your body. Most NI DOMs, their SI demon, a lot of our memory is passive and implicit memory. It's through repetition, so it's muscle memory, it's sensory memory, it's through conditioning, whereas our explicit memory, things like facts and details and past experiences, can be very limited unless we're truly present in the moment.
That's so interesting. That makes so much sense for a lot of experiences I've had.
Your focus on the experience that you're in is very blurry. And so as a consequence, you're not holding on to the details of what's happening in a way where you can recall them necessarily. You're more taking in the gestalt, the total experience. This honestly just came to me as you were both talking. I think generally we're going to bucket things into two categories. The way things typically are, and then the outliers. Rather than holding on to individual events necessarily, unless it was an outlier. If you think of somebody, you think of the way that they talk, the way that they walk. You don't think about necessarily any one particular event involving them unless there was some outlier that was an extreme circumstance for you as a person.
Or something that really meant something to me.
Yeah, you assigned a lot of significance to it. I think if it was an outlier, you assigned significance to it. And so what do I mean by outlier? It's just data that's outside of the normal expected parameters. You expected somebody to behave this way. You did not ever remember the time that your mom walked in and did the same thing she always did. That just never crosses your mind. But the time that she did the thing that was very different, that's the one you stored. I think NI users are dealing in the currency of significance. Is it significant or is it insignificant? And they're assessing everything through that lens. And that means their own perceptions, they're doing that same thing. Like, am I having a significant perception right now, or am I having an insignificant perception right now? If I perceive it as insignificant, then I'm not going to go through any effort to store it or remember it or hold on to it in any way. And that can cause problems because you might have experienced something through that lens of insignificance, and to someone else around you, it was very significant. So you've completely not stored any information whatsoever about this very significant thing to someone else because it just wasn't in your lens of significance.
Yeah, it's been blended in with all the other similar events that are basically the same gist. So it's just one giant event. You
didn't hold on to it as the breakfast we had last Tuesday, So it just didn't happen. It never got stored that way.
Which Tuesday? I don't know.
Do you guys have this experience where if someone asks you, what did you do yesterday?
I have no fucking clue.
Yeah, if I don't look at my diary, I won't know what I'm doing that day.
Yeah.
Whereas my mum and her mum, it's really funny. They hold all their dates and everything they're doing that week, that month in their head. And I'm just like, how do you do that? That is insane.
But then you won't see SI users doing the same existential grappling about what it all means,
Yeah, that's their demon. So they're going to be going through horrible moments if they're looking into that.
Right. Well, I think they'll find the meaning in other ways. What do you mean? What does the universe mean? It means going to work. It means putting in an honest 40 hours a week. It means taking care of your family,
Yeah,
sure. Very
That's
dutiful.
what it means. Get out of the clouds and look around,
Oh my God. Yeah, I've been told so many times. What's the phrase? Navel gazing, that's it. I find that fun. Obviously, sometimes it's not helpful, like that classic NITI loop thing. I really identify with that when it becomes unhealthy. But actually, I play in ideas and I love it. I love it so much. It makes me so happy.
And the thing is, society says this frequently. Don't overthink it, they say.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. And, for the longest time, I just tried to resist overthinking it because of that, But it eventually, over the course of my life, as I've gotten more mature, I've realized I have no choice. I am wired to overthink it. That's just how I am. It's my head. I can use it how I want.
Yeah, so long as you're not being a cunt about it, I think it's fine.
I do think you're spinning on extra cycle. I do think there's a very high risk of damaging yourself. And so...
Yeah, but I think there's ways of recognizing that in yourself.
You have to mitigate, I think. For me, it's a lot of self-care. I feel like I'm able to only barely keep up. It's like running my computer really hot and having to have a powerful cooling system.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel like I burn so much energy just thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all that energy, you're exerting it up in the head.
For sure. So what were your observations from UX and VR when it comes to the interplay between SE and NI?
VR is actually a really good tool to help inferior SE users, I think, to develop that. Because it's kind of hard to flex those muscles.
Literally as well. Sometimes.
Literal muscles, yeah. You need mental stimulation quite a bit. For me, exercise is challenging because I'm just not interested in sports. So that right there off the bat takes me out of, the majority of exercise-based activities. So now you're left with working out and things like that. And to me, working out is really boring. So that's been a struggle for me. There was a time where I was doing a lot of VR and I was playing Space Pirate Trainer and Beat Saber from the standpoint of coordination, which someone who has superior extroverted sensing is not typically very coordinated because they're not using their body as much and not, I guess, building those natural pathways in their brain to move a certain way. So that was something that I experienced in VR is the more I was doing it, because I was in a simulated environment where I wasn't around other people.
There's no comparison and stuff.
Yeah, it's hard being uncoordinated around coordinated people. I'm out here trying to do sports in a school environment and everyone else is very competent and I'm feel like I'm moving through jello.
Thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed this So, and I don't know if this is a hypermobility thing, but I noticed that outside of school, sports settings, and in my adult life, when I feel and felt confident and held and secure and was leaning into aspects of my physicality that were maybe more fun, more natural to me, I actually have very good physical capabilities.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's like kind of performance anxiety that brings on a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when I was younger, as I said, I had hypermobility and I didn't know I had hypermobility. That means that some of my joints have larger than normal range, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're flexible, because some of your muscles can contract, basically keep your body from being like a bag of floppy bones. When I was in situations such as like swimming class, when I was in my dance classes and doing like acting and stuff outside of school, I did really well. And as an adult, I did some performance work and life modeled for many years. I did well in those areas. But as soon as you throw a ball at me or make me do something in front of people where I feel like I'm judged or whatever, I'm tripping over, or if somebody's micromanaging me, I will drop things and smash plates, and you know what I mean? As soon as I'm like tired or stressed, or I don't know if you can relate to any of that.
I can relate to all of that, yes.
Yeah.
Not to your specific disability that you mentioned, but definitely to many of the things that you mentioned involving that performance anxiety.
It's funny because I've connected with other people who have the condition. I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And I've noticed that a few of us seem to have the INFJ cognitive function stack, or at least I strongly suspect that we do. And I just wonder if there might be any correlation there, you know, with inferior SE.
Or it could be survivorship bias in the sense that the way that you ran into those people or communicated with those people are the ways that INFJs would find each other, something like that.
Possibly. Yeah, I have a theory about EDS that we sniff each other out.
Like-minded people will find each other, you know?
Well, this is more like like-bodied people. It's funny, I've had people come up to me before. So, for example, in an aerial yoga class I took once, someone came up to me and was like, you move like you have EDS. Do you have EDS? And I was like, yes. Do you? She was like, yes. And she was like, I could tell. I have some quite magical, maybe conspiratorial theories about that in my head. But
I think maybe other personality types that have it might not have the same level of perception, perhaps, that an INFJ might
possibly,
have.
Yeah.
Where they might notice those things about you, you know?
I was thinking more about the inferior SE and the floppy bodies.
Yes.
For me, I was very interested in sports as a kid. I was probably influenced by my older siblings because all of my sisters older than me were doing gymnastics. So I was constantly mirroring them as a kid. And my mom finally let me join gymnastics in like kindergarten. So before I really had any fear, I was flipping over things, running around things, climbing up walls. So I developed my coordination through gymnastics before I really experienced fear. So the inferior part happened when I got hurt and my feet clipped the lower bar and I basically folded in half backwards.
Oh no, ow.
I've since overcome that fear, but I was never the same. But my coordination, just from the repetition and the practice from multiple years as a child, really developed my coordination. But the inferior part of, you know, that stage fright thing, like I enjoy karaoke, but before I could get up to do it, even though I really, really wanted to do it, I would have to have several drinks to get the courage to go up there and do it.
That's so interesting. I've always loved singing and I used to sing a lot as a child, but then I developed shame and sometimes physically can't sing because I'm too scared.
Yeah. SC inferior is developed through repetition, which is that SI-SE link. In order to develop the SE, you have to incorporate the SI because they're linked. Just like to really develop your NI to its potential, you do have to work with your NE nemesis. You have to make it an ally and get all of those ideas, all of those possibilities to really improve NI. Otherwise, NI is just going to go off on its own little thing and not come up with other possibilities that could occur. And you just totally miss out on it and get your predictions completely wrong because you didn't think about all the other possibilities. So you really have to team up with the other side of the function to really develop it.
I was going to bring us on to that to close the conversation, NI in contrast and also in conjunction with NE. Yeah, do you want to expand on that a little bit more, both of you guys?
I can tell you one thing is AI, specifically large language models, are a godsend for NI DOMs, because what you can do with it is use it to generate lots of ideas. It's like, give me 10 ideas for XYZ and it'll spit it right out.
I actually have the opposite problem. It's almost like my NE is on steroids, but I hate it because my NI wants to control it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So,
I mean, it's different for everybody. So really,
it's like I wish I had less ideas. Like my ideas overwhelm me. I did a 3-part series with my friend who's also a creative. Her name's Charlie O'Connor. We called it Mind Tigers because I came up with that word from a piece of writing that I did to describe what I think is my NE and my NI having a battle. All my ideas felt like these beautiful tigers that were scratching at my head, and I wanted to look after all of them, and then they all started having babies, and then I started to try and lock them in cages to try and control them, and then they all started fucking in the cages, and then there was like 5 million tigers, and it's like I don't have the time or the space or the resources to do anything with all these tigers. So in the end, I let them out of the cages. But it's something I really struggle with because I get so attached to my ideas and want to NI them into reality. But there's so many of them, especially during my apocalypse. Could talk on this NINE subject for a million years. So I'm going to give the floor back to you guys.
I want to hear Sarah's thoughts.
Oh man, I was going to say go for it, Dan.
Oh no, well, okay then. I will say that at least for me, I do know exactly what you're talking about, Freyia, and then I just realized that there's something that I've incorporated into my life that has alleviated that, and that's why I haven't felt it as much lately. I put a lot of things into documents and spreadsheets and so on, and I'm constantly getting things out of my head because I can't keep them in there. There's just too many things coming in. And
me and my friend Charlie in our conversation, we named it anti-zookeeping.
Anti-zookeeping, letting all the animals out? Yeah. The thing is, you got to be able to find them again. So
that's the hard part.
That's the hard part. So yeah, I have systems that I can't even describe how they work because I have no idea how they work. But
yeah, me too. It's going back to that whole thing of you have the language in your head, but you haven't put it into tangibility. So it's like you've never had to explain the system to somebody, but the system just works.
Right.
Intuitively.
More like multiple systems that just developed as you were creating it because you had to put the information somewhere and you haven't really gone back to really clean it up. So you just got 30 different systems.
Because how would you have been able to predict where your future stuff would come from or what format it would be in or whatever? So, by the way, this is something I've noticed about myself. I don't know about both of you, but I find it very easy to predict everything but myself. I have no idea.
It always
I think I'm very predictable. I think I'm an incredibly predictable person.
Well, for me, in terms of having 30 different systems that all got built as you're going through this process and through a rabbit hole, really does look like the conspiracy theorist and the guy that's
Charlie
trying to put all the strings together. Like,
it definitely looks like that. It definitely looks like that.
Oh my god,
yeah. Because you're going to be working on this one thing and everything's nice and neat, and then you get this new information, you're like, what the fuck is this? And you got to go over here and you got to start a new thing that's got this thing, and you find this new anomaly that you got to go over here. It's like,
or do you ever do this one? Do you ever make charts to understand your own whatever? It's like, I'm going to make a chart for myself.
I have a spreadsheet because I'm really into menstruality as a means of checking in with my SE. I'm really into my femininity and menstrual cycle tracking, etc. Yeah, I have analytical spreadsheets to analyze my menstrual cycle.
Yeah, to many other people, that might be insane. For INFJ, it's, I just made a chart, to understand my own whatever.
Yeah.
So I can understand my brain.
Exactly.
I made a chart.
Because you're actively trying to understand yourself, so... But I think most people think it would be silly to not be able to understand. What, you don't understand yourself? How do you not understand yourself?
One of my friends I lost my home. I'm staying with family at the moment. And when I packed up my house, I was like, oh, I'm going to make an inventory of all my boxes so I know where all my things are, so I can put them in the attic. And then when I'm able to escape again, I will know, oh, I don't need to buy a blender or whatever because I already have that in the attic. Do you know what I mean? And my friend was disgusted. It was like she was talking about that I'd exterminated a race of people or something. The way she spoke about it afterwards, she said it made me seem controlling. It's like, okay, we're just trying to be practical.
Actually, that brings me to another question. So who is more controlling? An INFJ controlling their environment, controlling their life, controlling their future, or a heavy TE user who's controlling the people around them or controlling their whatever? We normally think of TE as being the very controlling function, but I think other types can absolutely be very controlling, but in different ways, you know?
For different reasons.
I agree. But what are your thoughts on that, both of you?
If you ask me, I feel like I don't control anyone.
I'm sure you don't.
I probably do control without realizing I'm controlling, or some people might think I'm controlling. That's not the intention. But I definitely know that, and they're struggling to say something or going in a roundabout way, I will come in and finish a sentence for them.
I do that as well.
To come to the conclusion, to the point. What are you actually saying? And I'll say it for them. Mm-hmm. If they can't find the words. And some people
of my friends really like that.
Feel,
friends hate that.
Exactly. It really depends on who you're working with. Some people love it. They're like, thank you. I can't put it into words. And other people are like, well, you just let me speak for myself. It really depends on who you're working with as to how they're going to perceive the person. Are they going to see it as controlling and trying to manipulate the words? Or are they going to see it as helpful and making it concise?
I personally love it when people do that because of that word finding thing. If I'm really struggling, I'm like, you know, and I really like it when people do that to me.
Exactly. To me, I don't feel like I'm controlling. That's not the intention. I feel like I'm helping. But to somebody else, it could feel very controlling to them.
So let's talk about extroverted feeling.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, that's basically what we're talking about is extrovert feeling, really, because like on the one hand it's helping and on the other hand it's meddling, you know, and that's just how it is. If you get involved, you're meddling somehow. You're getting involved.
That is true. I've not thought about it like that before.
You can't communicate with people without changing them and changing yourself at the same time, you know.
Agreed.
As soon as you start talking, you've started changing the chemistry in their brain.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that, about co-regulation, co-dysregulation, as it may be. I always wrap up my conversations with my guests by asking the same question I asked at the beginning. So where are we finding you now? Physically, emotionally, spiritually, existentially, any other way you want to describe yourself in this moment compared to at the beginning of the conversation?
Well, in the beginning, I was physically seated, very stationary, behind my computer in a chair, uncertain as to how this was going to go, because I've never experienced this. And now I am walking around, roaming with my hands, just moving around freely, having a conversation and just enjoying the podcast.
Yay!
So that's good.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that, Sarah. It's been great to chat with you today.
It has been wonderful to chat with you both as well.
Yeah,
what about you, lovely Dan?
I mean, I feel very intellectually stimulated. And there was a point about halfway through the podcast where I became a listener when both of you were talking. And I was like, this is good radio. I'm enjoying this.
So, well, I'm glad at least I've got one person who's going to listen back to this.
I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation with both of you. I learned. I always enjoy hearing other people's perspectives and their experiences. It's going to widen my worldview. I guess I'm feeling a little more energized physically. That's probably going to put me off on a better foot today. So thanks for the juice, you know. It was like eating a meal.
Yeah, it was. It was like a really nice gourmet meal.
Yeah.
A food for thought.
Exactly.
Go INFJ Club.
Yes, go INFJ Club. Go straight back to bed, INFJs.
Is there anything that either of you guys want to platform or signal boost?
I mean, I do have a YouTube channel. I haven't done anything on it in a while. I did hit 1,000 members last week.
Oh, wow.
Thank you video. But beyond that, no, I don't need to plug myself.
I also have a YouTube channel. Anyone who's listening can just search YouTube for Daniel David Allen. You'll find me.
How are you spelling Allen? Are you spelling it like Allen Key?
Yes. Allen.
Okay, great. And anything else you guys want to platform that is not yourself? Not that that made me sound like I was calling you narcissistic. That's not what I was meaning.
Vote for human rights, please. Vote for democratic socialism. Vote for universal health care. Vote for UBI.
Yeah.
Vote for women's rights.
I don't know what UBI is though, so I don't know what
universal basic income.
Yes, I'm all about that. Yes.
Vote for paid family time leave off. Vote for high amount of vacation time and sick time for Americans. Vote for an insanely high minimum wage. Please, let's all take care of each other. How about
that? For sure, for absolute sure. There isn't any good vibes this week as the recording ran over, so the three of us were kicked off the recording platform. So sorry about this strange, awkward ending this week. The original recording went on for 4 hours. I have no idea how I managed to get it down to an hour. I'm quite impressed with myself. Also kind of gutted, but I didn't think any of you guys would stick around for 4 hours. I don't think I've earned that from my audience yet. I just wanted to jump in before I say my thank yous this week to plug a video by Dan, who was my lovely guest today, on visualizing NI. So if you're somebody who likes charts and infographics and visual aids like us little INFJs, you might find that interesting. I'm going to pop that in the show notes. It's how I became aware of Dan's work on the 8 cognitive functions, and I just think it's a really awesome video, so I wanted to plug that. Thanks again to our guest today, Sarah, for returning, and Dan for his first foray into the world of Folie, Deux, to Strong 365 mental health nonprofit for the signal boosting and helping us get on our feet, to my brother, Joe of Foxhunt, for the music, and Will Ainsworth for mixing the sound. If you want to learn more about our team and the other great things they get up to, check out the links in our show notes. We'd love to make these podcasts more accessible via transcripts and translations, but don't currently have the capacity to make this a reality. If you're listening and want to get involved in making this happen, please send us an email on hello@folie-r-deux.co.uk. That's Folie spelled Folie and Deux spelled Deux, or voice note us on Spotify to start a dialogue. If you're concerned about your mental health, we always advise going to a trusted member of your community first. This is also a reminder to check up on your favorite people, even those you consider holding it together just fine. In the words of Drs. Emily and Amelia Nagoski, the cure for burnout isn't self-care, it's all of us caring for each other. Access allowing spending your time and resources finding a support figure who gets to you can be an invaluable asset to your journey. If you're in crisis and don't know where to turn, Strong 365 hosts a peer support community 24/7 via 7 Cups. The link is in the show notes, where you can also find an extensive list of helplines for a range of countries. The world is better with you in it. Speak to you guys next time.
And as this is a fairy story, the drawing and all the characters in this story are only shadows.